most of these are American, so I could see why it was inevitable you should go to New York. What were your first impressions of the big, what do they call it, Big Apple?
Big Apple. Well, it's tremendously thrilling just on a physical level, as you know, New York. You just think, how did anybody build this with hands? How did human beings make this? It's wonderful on that level. But I made the big mistake, because I'm a big jazz fan. I got off the aeroplane, and I went to the subway, and I saw the A train. I thought, the A train, I gotta get this, trying to be cool, first time in New York, and I had a big, heavy tweed coat on and a sensible leather suitcase, being Scottish, of course. Nothing flash in plastic. You don't want people to think you're a student here. So, well, you don't. So I got on the A train, and it's a local, which means it stops at every station. It went up Spring Street, went up through the village, and I got to about 168th Street, and I suddenly remembered, that's the only way you get to Harlem. And I suddenly realized I was the only white guy in the train. Well, I mean, that's no big deal, except that Harlem, they don't welcome whiteys at all, and who can blame them? But I was sitting there like this in my wee coat thinking, well, isn't this interesting? All these people coming going, look at this, honky. So I got up at Jackson, what's it called? Jackson Heights, which is North Spanish Harlem, And I thought, well, I'm in New York, I'd better find out what the bars are like. I owe this to myself sociologically, And there was a great place called My Bar. It was written in neon. I thought, My Bar, how nice. How thoughtful of them. And I went in, and there's this black lady behind the counter. She says, hey, man, this is a colored bar. Do you mind? I said, no, not at all. I said, I come from in Scotland. People don't give a monkeys about that. I'll have a... I thought it'd be dead cool, I said, I'll have a shot of rye and a beer, please, So, and it wasn't until halfway through the conversation I realized what she meant was, do you mind pissing off? All these kind of dudes came in and kind of grabbed her aside and said, what's this honky? And then she said, this guy's from Scotland with the guys with the plaid skirts. He's okay. That became my local. And the place was covered with great old sort of faded pictures of jazz singers and boxers, and I used to go there quite regularly.
Did you ever get mugged in New York?
Funny you should say that, Clive. There's an interesting story there.
Tell us the story, Robbie.
Well, Clive, funnily enough, I did get mugged in New York.
It's a total surprise.
Well, it's certainly a surprise to me. Not to say a shock. I had this ghetto blaster, and I was, there's about 400 FM stations in New York. I mean, it's not a station, I guess, do you want blues or do you want jazz? You decide which week in 1957 of bebop you want to, and blip, there you are. And I was having a great old time. This huge guy came up with a big 2-liter bottle of wine. She smashed the end off very expertly, I thought. I was going to say to him, that was very clever. Did you practice that? It must take ages to get it to go so cleanly at the bottom. But something else overcame me. And I think I'd been out on a few clubs in the afternoon. I was a wee bit squiffy, to be honest. And when it's being a Glaswegian, having had a few drinks, people come up to you, a broken bottle, you go, why don't you... off? And he looked so shocked. He kind of crumpled and went away. And I saw him about the next day or 2 days later, and he went, big boy, don't go hitting anybody now, will you? But that's true. I mean, other people weren't so lucky. I mean, there are lunatics wandering around with guns. And then they go, did you?
7-foot guy, he came straight up to me. And I just started reaching my wallet. And he said, have you got 25 cents for a cup of coffee? And I was throwing my credit cards at him. I nicked his face with an American Express gold card.
So I had a cup of coffee at the Waldorf.
he was a nice guy.
Yes.
You're a big man, but not even Orson Welles.
Perceptive of you.
Yep. Yeah. My research team doesn't miss much. But not even Orson Welles needed 4 cars. Why have you got all those cars? You've got a lot of cars around you. My research team's been there. Your house is surrounded by cars.
That's true. Well, there's no excuse for it, really, is there? Well, first of all, I have a passion for them. I love them. So in an ideal world, I'd probably have about 20, my 20 favorite cars ever built. But that's the great thing about old Yankee cars is nobody wants them because they guzzle gas and they're difficult to insure. You can pick up a car that still does 130 miles an hour for £1,200, £1,000.
You've got one of those, haven't you? A real highway cruiser.
It's a Jezebel. 2 tons of Detroit with an unmerciful engine. It's wonderful.
What do you pay in insurance premiums?
Well, it's very funny, actually. There's a whole routine about that, about how the business community regard the creative community, because I'm sure it can't be statistics. There aren't enough actors who can afford a car to get any statistics of what their driving's like. But it's great. You have the conversation. Now, what sort of car? They all speak like that, people who work in the insurance offices. I think they all go to a state electrocution teacher. They're like the people in railway stations. You know, they have this funny cadence that nobody in real life really actually has, don't they? And you get, so, it's a 1971 Pontiac Deluxe. How do you spell that, sir? Oh, there's an E at the end of the Lux. Is that not Deluxe? No, shut up, get on with it. You know. And you get into this, and it's all going very sweetly. And she said, yes, I'm sure we can accommodate that. And the last question is always, and what is it you do for a living, sir? I'm an actor. And then there's a terrible... followed by, I'll just get Mr. Wilkins.
Mr. Wilkins is obviously the high-powered troubleshooter here, and he comes and says, yes, so what seems to be the trouble?
Nothing, really. It's just that I'm an actor, and I've got a... Hello? Hello?
Robbie Coltrane has agreed to stay here for the second half of the show, pending a discussion of his contract. Meanwhile, that giant of a man, Jonathan Miller, is trying to work out how to get into our studio. Jonathan Miller, whom we won't bother to applaud at this point, in case he gets used to it and wants more. What is there left to say about this man? Plenty, because he is so many men. Theatre director, opera director, author, philosopher, deep-sea diver, astronaut. Jonathan Miller is also a student of the human body, especially his own body, known to his friends as the body in question, but known to himself as my body. While still a medical student at the Royal Naval College, Miller developed the concept of body language. He came to believe that various parts of his body were speaking to him. His right armpit told him that life inside a denim shirt was no fun. Later on, Miller got on better terms with his body. His left armpit told him that life is less hairy in an Yves Saint Laurent shirt. Miller's interior organs insisted on donating themselves to science, but they allowed him to hold them briefly until their taxi arrived. Yet Miller retains his interest in everything. Nobody is more interested in the general election than Jonathan Miller. But why go on when the body in question is here now? He's been here before, but not really, because he's always different. Ladies and gentlemen, Jonathan Miller. Robbie and I were talking about cars before we were interrupted. Do you drive a status symbol car?
No, I just got an ordinary Ford, you see. I mean, I just get into the thing. I rather resent having to have a decaying object which loses its value on purchase and then gets worse and worse. Also, I honestly was ill at ease with cars because I took a long time to pass my test. And finally only passed it when I undertook to satisfy these rather absurd requirements of the examiner for showing all the road signs. I mean, I realized that I failed all the previous tests by not demonstrating to him. Finally, it became a Marcel Marceau-like demonstration of movement of the hands, looking into the mirror. And then finally, I did get this wonderful a congratulatory first on my 8th try, which he said, well, it gives me great pleasure to tell you have passed your test, sir, and may I also take this opportunity of congratulating you on your use of mirror. Only because I'd gone through these convulsive...
Do you think people are flaunting what they haven't got with their cars and the symbols of their success and so on? Is there too much of that?
Well, I think people do take on cars as a way of demonstrating how well they're doing. And I suppose that the current plethora of BMWs and Mercedes is part of Thatcher's Britain and a demonstration of how well people are doing commercially.
Robbie, apart from cars, what other stuff have you got? You got stuff?
Stuff?
Things? You got things? You get things? Terrific stereos and stuff like that?
No, I've got an early 60s stereo, an old Leak, which makes the most wonderful noise.
A Leak?
A Leak. Yeah, they stopped
Doesn't
making
sound
that.
very Japanese, does it?
It's not Leak. It's not. They were made in Britain. I'm very glad to say. And the very earliest transistors, which look like Havana cigars that somebody's been painted. But it makes a wonderful noise, absolutely stunning noise.